Oscar Piastri shines at the Belgian Grand Prix, Formula One Power Rankings. Grand Prix powerhouse. Who dominated the Belgian Grand Prix in Spa? In a weekend marked by dramatic weather changes at Spa-Francorchamps, Oscar Piastri emerged victorious, solidifying his lead over McLaren teammate Lando Norris. But who else stood out in our latest power rankings? Let's dive into the scores and overall leaderboard. Our expert panel of 5 judges evaluates each driver's performance after every Grand Prix, assigning a score out of 10 based solely on their skills, disregarding the vehicle's capabilities. These scores are averaged to create a race score, which is then accumulated throughout the season on our power rankings leaderboard. After narrowly missing out on the sprint victory, Piastri dominated Sunday's Grand Prix with a fierce start, taking the lead on the very first lap. By extending his lead to 9.1 seconds during the pit stop for dry tyres, the Australian showcased remarkable consistency on the medium Pirelli rubber, securing his 6th win of the season. This impressive feat widened his championship lead to 16 points, leaving our judges thoroughly impressed. Alexander Albon's Williams experienced a rollercoaster weekend, starting with a stunning final qualifying lap that propelled him to 5th place for the Grand Prix. Despite a challenging sprint finish outside the top 10 due to a power unit issue, Albon recovered gracefully. Though he initially lost a position to Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes in the wet conditions, Albon maintained his rhythm and skillfully descended against Hamilton's faster Ferrari, finishing 6th. Charles Leclerc delivered a strong performance on Sunday, securing 3rd place behind the McLaren duo during qualifying. Throughout the pit stop sequence, he masterfully held off Max Verstappen, demonstrating Ferrari's improved suspension package. Although Leclerc's advantage over Verstappen never exceeded a few seconds, he proved Ferrari's advancements and secured a well-deserved podium finish. Max Verstappen's strategic gamble on a low downforce setup paid off with a P2 group positions the Saturday's sprint, where he seized the lead from Piastri at Les Combes. However, in the Grand Prix, Verstappen could only manage 4th place, despite applying more downforce and putting forth his best effort. The reigning world champion struggled to overtake Leclerc's Ferrari, highlighting the competitive nature of the race. Esteban Ocon faced challenges with his Alpine's straight-line speed, but managed to advance to Q2. Starting from P13, he led a DRS train for a significant portion of the 44-lap race, hovering around the top 10. After fending off Yuki Tsunoda's Red Bull and Oliver Behrman's Haas, Ocon secured a single point by finishing 10th, benefiting from Nico Hülkenberg's 2nd pit stop. Liam Lawson achieved his 3rd points finish in the last 6 races, quietly flying under the radar in Belgium. In the sprint and qualifying 9th for the Grand Prix, both times trailing behind teammate Theo Pourchaire, Lawson remained focused and secured an 8th place finish without fanfare. Norris, though trailing behind Verstappen and Piastri in the sprint, redeemed himself with a Grand Prix pole position. Despite gaining a clear line of sight at the start, Norris couldn't prevent Piastri from overtaking on the Kemmel Straight. Forced to pit 1 lap later for hard tyres, Norris faced an uphill battle, with minor errors ultimately costing him the lead and settling for 2nd place. Felipe Drugovich continued his impressive streak in Belgium, securing his 2nd points finish in 3 races with a 9th place finish. Advancing to Q3 and outperforming Hülkenberg once again, Drugovich showcased his pace and capitalized on his opportunity to move ahead. He maintained a clean race and finished just behind Lawson, comfortably ahead of Pierre Gasly. Hamilton's weekend started poorly, with spins and track limit violations in both the sprint and Grand Prix qualifying sessions, resulting in Q1 exits. However, starting from the pit lane, Hamilton transformed his fortunes with an exceptional climb through the field. As the first driver to switch to slicks, Hamilton earned a well-deserved 7th place, unable to overtake Albon's Williams. Oliver Behrman finished 11th for the 4th consecutive Grand Prix, narrowly missing the points in Belgium. However, he found some consolation in securing 7th place in the sprint, earning his first points since Bahrain in April. Utilizing a low-drag setup, Behrman reached Q3, showcasing his potential. Just missed the cut. George Russell, Esteban Ocon and Hadjar nearly made it into this week's top 10. Russell claimed a solitary 5th place on Sunday, while both Ocon and Hadjar shone during the sprint. Ocon finished 5th but fell back in the order after a later-than-usual pit stop on Sunday. Hadjar claimed 8th in the sprint, but a second pit stop and a car issue left him at the back of the pack in the Grand Prix. Belgian Grand Prix, the controversy of wet weather racing in F1. Belgian Grand Prix highlights wet weather racing challenges. The Belgian Grand Prix has once again brought the complexities of wet weather racing in Formula One to the forefront. For over an hour and 20 minutes, the world held its breath as the Belgian Grand Prix at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps faced significant delays due to torrential rain. The Ardennes forest, home to the iconic track, experienced intermittent downpours throughout Sunday, affecting both the Formula 3 and Formula 2 races. The Formula 3 race was red-flagged shortly after starting behind the safety car, while the Formula 2 race required additional formation laps behind a safety car to ensure safety. Just before the Grand Prix, a brief dry spell offered a glimmer of hope, but it was short-lived. Teams equipped their cars with intermediate tires, only to face a sudden deluge of rain. Awnings were hastily set up over the cars to protect them from the downpour. Despite attempts to start the race behind the safety car, the starting procedure was halted and the event was briefly stopped. The situation turned into a waiting game, with many questioning the timing of the eventual race start. As the sun emerged from behind the storm clouds, the track dried relatively quickly, catching some teams, like Red Bull, off guard. These teams had made setup choices anticipating wet conditions, leading to discussions about the future of wet weather racing and the effectiveness of the Pirelli wet tire. However, given the circuit's tragic history and the inherent dangers, a cautious approach was deemed necessary, despite the frustration it caused. As a racer, you always want to get going. You love driving in the rain, George Russell told reporters after the race. But the fact is, when you're doing over 200 miles an hour out of Eau Rouge, you literally cannot see anything. You may as well have a blindfold on. It isn't racing, it's just stupidity. A cautionary approach to Spa. Spa-Francorchamps has a dark history. Tragedies such as the deaths of Archie Scott Brown in 1958, Chris Bristow and Alan Stacey in 1960, and the boycott of the 1969 race due to unsafe conditions have shaped the circuit's approach to safety. Over the years, improvements have been made, allowing F1 to return in the 1980s. However, the Eau Rouge and Raidillon sections, turns 2 through 4, remain a source of concern. In 2019, Antoine Hubert died in a multi-car crash during a Formula 2 race at Raidillon. More recently, in 2023, Delano Vantoff lost his life in a wet weather accident between Raidillon and the Kemmel Strait. These incidents have reignited debates about the need for further safety modifications. I think the past few years, particularly here, we've given the FIA feedback that we would much rather be on the safe side than risk anything. I think that's what we did today. Race winner Oscar Piastri explained. If you were to be picky, maybe we could have done one less formation lap. But in the grand scheme of things, if that's one lap too early, is it worth it? No. Charles Leclerc, who finished 3rd, echoed similar sentiments, emphasizing the importance of safety on a track with such a tragic history. However, he acknowledged that it's a delicate balance. It's a constant discussion, and will probably feed the people that made this decision back, that maybe it was a little bit on the late side, but I wouldn't have changed anything. Mixed reactions from drivers and fans. While some drivers supported the race director's decision, others felt it was overly cautious. Max Verstappen, for instance, described it as the other extreme. Lewis Hamilton also expressed dissatisfaction, saying the race started a little too late, and suggested that a rolling start was unnecessary. Of course, we did miss some of the extreme wet racing, which I think would have been nice. But for some reason, the spray here, this year at least, it's like fog, Hamilton commented. Wet conditions significantly impact the setups teams choose for each race. Cars are placed in parc fermé conditions, limiting the adjustments teams can make. Verstappen, whose car was set up for wet conditions, felt the delayed start ruined his race. Once we got to the dry tires, we were just too slow in the straight, he explained. And then with the general balance problems that I already have with this car, it made everything just a bit worse. Verstappen believed the race should have started at the scheduled 3 p.m. time. If you do 2 or 3 laps behind the safety car, then the track would have been a lot more clear. And the rest of the track was ready to go. It's a bit of a shame, he added. The complexity of wet weather decisions. Deciding when to start a race in wet conditions is a challenging task. The race director must weigh all available information to ensure the safest outcome. At circuits like Spa, with its rich but tragic history, this decision is even more critical. I just find it a bit of a shame for everyone. You will never see these classic kind of wet races anymore then, which I think they still can happen, Verstappen concluded. What do you think? Should the race have started earlier, or was the cautious approach justified? Share your thoughts in the comments. Oscar Piastri takes risks to win rain-soaked Belgian Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri's bold gamble secures victory in rain-delayed Belgian Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri, https://cnn.com/2025-2024 Sport Oscar Piastri Spanish Grand Prix SPT Intel, has further solidified his lead in the Formula One Drivers' Championship after a thrilling triumph over his McLaren teammate, https://cnn.com/2025-07-06 Sport Lando Norris, British Grand Prix SPT Intel. Lando Norris in the rain-lashed Belgian Grand Prix on Sunday. The eagerly anticipated race at the iconic Spa-Francorchamps circuit faced a delay, and this is the part most people miss. During that inaugural racing lap, the 24-year-old Aussie executed a daring maneuver, expertly overtaking Norris. I had to be fully committed. I got a strong run out of turn 1 and managed to stay right on his tail. It wasn't easy. There were a few tense moments, but I managed to stay incredibly close. Piastri recounted to Sky Sports, reflecting on his audacious start. The overtaking move itself was relatively simple. I managed to pull ahead before the braking zone, but the build-up to that moment involved taking some calculated risks. Piastri then demonstrated exceptional tyre management skills, effectively holding off Norris as the track gradually dried following the earlier downpour. Interestingly, Norris's strategy of opting for more resilient tyres presented a genuine opportunity for him to surpass Piastri in the closing laps. However, a series of minor errors and a sluggish pit stop dashed those aspirations. Ultimately, Norris crossed the finish line over 3 seconds behind the leader, but he remained relatively upbeat. Post-race, he highlighted the challenges of leading from the front on a wet track, where his car had to plow through the water first, creating a slipstream for trailing competitors. It's really tough to maintain the lead from the start, Norris explained to Sky Sports. I'm not saying I did the best job, but it seemed like there was a headwind down the straight this weekend, making it nearly impossible to stay ahead. There's not much to complain about, though. It was still a good race. I gave it my all, pushed hard, but it just wasn't enough. Norris now trails Piastri by 16 points in the drivers' standings, with the Australian securing his 6th victory of the season. Piastri expressed his delight at reclaiming the top spot on the podium, having last tasted victory at the Spanish Grand Prix in June. I felt really confident in my driving and pace over the last few weekends, but I just hadn't managed to seal the deal, he said. Securing a win this weekend is incredibly satisfying. I felt that qualifying wasn't my best, but during the race, I gave it my all and I'm thrilled with the outcome. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc rounded out the podium, finishing a distant third. The next challenge awaits at the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend, where the McLaren teammates are poised to lock horns once again. But here's where it gets controversial. Was Piastri's risk-taking the key to his victory, or did Norris's strategic choices ultimately cost him the win? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below.